The transfer window is closed. All the players have been signed. And I know what you're thinking. Who won the transfer window? Well, we've worked out a way to measure who that is, along with our friend Dan Pelchen, who is the owner of Traits Insights, data kind of company. He used to be a lead analyst for Chelsea. There's a podcast we have on Tifo IRL with him, which you should go and watch. He's a very nice guy, very talented also. Now what we've done is built this thing with Dan that allows us to rate players with a number. So it's based on various data points using actual statistics, you see, to tell them who's good or not. This is Newcastle squad from last season. You can see that Bruno Guimaraes is their best player, clearly because he is, and the data tells us that. Now, this data rating is built from loads of other data. So lots of clubs and outlets, and we have it, lots of data, loads of numbers, but what do you do with it? How do you visualize it and make use? The way it works is you have statistics. Then you turn those into, well, you make them metrics, right? So things like progressive passes or crossing or shots on goal, all this sort of stuff. There's loads and loads and loads of data points here that get turned into overall ratings for these various categories. And that gives you an overall rating, which is how we know Bruno Guimaraes is the best player in Newcastle squad. That's how we did it. Very technical, but we can use it to work out who the best transfer window team is. And we'll start with Newcastle because we're on them. Now, they are one of many teams who spent a lot of money and recruited a lot of players. Nottingham Forest got more players than anyone has in the history of time. West Ham spent a lot of money. Chelsea were really good. Barcelona also had a massive window. But Newcastle here, now the weaknesses they had, centre-back particularly, so they brought in Dan Burn, then they brought in Sven Botman, this guy here. So a lot of money they spent on this guy. And we can see why he's rated higher. It's to do with his passing being exceptionally higher than Lascelles. And if you're trying to build a team that can build out from the back and make sure you're improving on weaknesses of building out from the back, this sort of model allows you to see them side by side, so we can tell that, well, this guy's clearly better at things you want him to be better at, because there's stylistic things to take into consideration as well. But if you want to play it from the back, Botman's better at it, as well as has been better generally at defensive things. Off ball is the measure we're using to have this sort of stuff here, with loads of different data points behind it. So that's one player they brought in. Another player they brought in is a striker, is Alexander Isak. So Callum Wilson obviously injured straight away. Chris Wood, their lowest rated player in the entire squad, perhaps unfairly because he doesn't get many games, but they need to improve on this, and he's their only backup striker, and they have with Alexander Isak. Suddenly they've got a much better player who will, I would have no doubt, improve this number, but you see where he's better at: scoring and creation, passing, not as good defending, but that's probably because, as we see Chris Wood, stylistically, he's very heavily weighted towards aerial statistics. He's a big lad who win the ball, and that comes under the defending category, so we can tell what kind of striker he is compared to Alexander Isak. So scoring and creation, clearly Isak is the winner here, making him look like a far more dangerous player, particularly with his dribbling and carries. So if you're looking for a player who can dribble and carry as a striker, that's what you get. This is how the model works. This is what you build. Now, Man United, another team who've brought in a lot of players, our data is from the top 5 leagues. We don't have the Eredivisie, which is a shame because Man United are only allowed to buy players from the Netherlands now. And here we have is Paul Pogba was their best player last season, particularly because he was so good at creating chances. So his creation, whether through progressive passes or being able to set up other players to have a shot, makes him really high in the way this is weighted, even over 20 appearances. So we had a disrupted season last season. But with him gone, that's their best player gone, so the ceiling is dropped. It becomes Cristiano Ronaldo, their best player, you see. So who have they brought in? We can't tell you about Martinez, Malacia and Antony, because we don't have the data to be able to do that, but we can tell you about the midfield that they improved. Now, Casemiro, one of the great defensive midfielders in the world, they bought him, and clearly he's good, but the numbers show it, they really do. The rating is, it just makes sense as to how good he is compared to McTominay, but again, stylistically, this is what we see. He's so much better at passing, much better at defending, better at scoring, maybe not relevant, and again, creation. So if we're trying to find a player who can better progress the ball, win the ball back, we know Casemiro can do it to a very, very much higher standard. And how about Fred? Same sort of thing. Casemiro much, much better than Fred. We can just see it in the numbers. So a huge improvement for Man United. You can see it side by side here. The blue line is Casemiro, the orange is McTominay and Fred, either side. And that's what you get. So Man United's transfers have improved the team immeasurably, well, measurably here, in midfield particularly. So that one signing of Casemiro, and another signing that's made him much better in midfield is Christian Eriksen. So for value for money, this guy came on a free transfer, and this is a superb signing and it's superb, particularly because of what he brings to you in your passing metrics. So Eriksen here, you can see he outscores everyone and everything you want in passing. And for a midfielder, that's what you need. He brings the technical ceiling of the team higher, but he's also got a hugely, he scores highly here in these particular sections that you want him to be in, like creation and passing. That's why he's so good. So Man United have done very well in the transfer window, but have they won it? Well, let me show you Arsenal, whose best player apparently is Eddie Nketiah. Perhaps a symbol that we've not got this quite right yet. Basically, we spend a lot of time making these right and tweaking them. We're pretty good with how we've got it. But you can see he's very highly rated because I think he's played very few minutes, mostly off the bench with this number of appearances. And this is the thing with data as well. Sometimes you see outliers in data when you're scouting or trying to work out who's good at what. And those outliers allow you to then dive in a bit deeper and work out that this player actually is an outlier and is a huge potential to be better than people currently can perceive him to be. Or it could be that he's just come on off the bench a few times and scores highly because you're chasing the game, so you get more chances to be able to influence the game in those types of situations. But here we see Nketiah and Tomiyasu, again, not perfect because of what we're doing with this per 90, but Tomiyasu scores highly. He's better than you might think he is. That's what the rating shows us. So you can go in and investigate that with some actual eye scouting, looking at the player in real life, and that's how you do scouting. But Saka's here, 2.8, this is what you want to see. They're all right. But what they've done is sign players that have made them better, like Gabriel Jesus, 3.24, who I think instantly goes to being their best player by some margin based off last season's data. So Arsenal are much, much better, much higher ceilings than Jesus, and you can see it in the creation, scoring, passing, defending. Everything is better. Look how much more involved he is, how much better his stats are than Alexandre Lacazette, who is blue, who was their main striker. That one signing's made that team much, much, much better. And then we move on to Chelsea. So Chelsea spent a lot of money, signed a lot of players, got rid of their manager already. And what we see is that Reece James scores the highest. At the bottom is Callum Hudson-Odoi, you can't get on the game. But look, he's playing similar amounts of minutes and appearances to what you get for Arsenal, but scores much lower. So are those players better? You have to scout them and see. But this is what we have for Chelsea. Now, what have they signed? Well, they have signed a striker in Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. Last season they had Romelu Lukaku, and didn't work out, and we can see why. He wasn't involved at all, didn't really rate highly on anything. Scoring was very, very low here for what you think Lukaku is. His passing's poor. But what you see with Aubameyang is his scoring is really high. This is from Barcelona. His score at Arsenal was very low. His score at Barcelona was very high. And that brings us on to Barcelona, who had a very good window, even though they had to pull all sorts of levers and shenanigans to be able to afford these players in the first place, let alone register them. And Aubameyang, few appearances, but he did very well. All of them scored a lot of goals. He was a very important player for Xavi last season, and is obviously now left for Chelsea. But this is what you see with Barcelona, whose players all score very highly, which makes sense because in the Liga they dominate games, and even though they weren't challenging for the title last season, they were there or thereabouts for most of it, and they tend to win most of their games with a large amount of goals. So that's what you see from Barcelona's statistics all over here. Again, there's too much to go through in a video like this, but if you go on the Traits Insights website and get a demo of Dan, if you are someone inclined to look at this sort of stuff, that's what you get. Now, they signed a new defender in Jules Koundé, but how do they identify him as being the player they need? Because there's loads of defenders in the world. Who should they be buying? Well, Barcelona defenders and Xavi defenders play out from the back. They're very good at passing. They're good in all phases of play, particularly in like midfield phase if you're in there, or building from the back, like we said. Jules Koundé, clearly, if you look at his numbers here, he's the purple worm. You get Koundé, Araujo and Piqué, existing defenders. He scores so highly in creation and well in passing that he clearly stands out as a player that Barcelona should look at more. And you see it in his passing here. Defensive numbers are good as well. A lot of fouls, off-ball, on-ball, aerial, not as highly involved as Gerard Piqué, but he's been excellent for years at Barcelona. But then you see it in creation and his passing. That's what Xavi wants, a player like this who can depend on defensively, but is also going to give them that extra bit going forward. Now, the other player they signed was Robert Lewandowski. It's one of the big ones they signed, in addition to all the others. But Lewandowski is one of the world's best strikers, and the data kind of shows it. Not as high as you might think, because he's mostly focused on scoring. If you look at his radar, he's really high just at these kind of goals and shots, and so high, in fact, he's broken the model. He's broken this radar gram, whatever you want to call it. And this is versus Memphis Depay, who played up front through the middle for most of Barcelona's season last season, and before that as well. Now you see, Memphis scores very, very high. He's a very good player, very involved, does all the things you want him to, very creative, much more than Lewandowski. doesn't score as much, and what they want from their striker is to score the goals. Sounds very obvious, but if you have Depay scores more as like a midfielder, so it depends on how you want your striker to play. Some managers might be looking for a player who can create and pass, playing as a number 10, maybe a withdrawn 9, something like that, and Depay clearly shows that he can do that sort of thing. But then if you compare with what they had before in Lionel Messi, I mean, this is crazy, look. This is what Messi's numbers were for Barcelona in the 2020 season. This is Memphis Depay in the 2021-22 season. This is what you see. Like, Messi's just crazy good. Completely breaks the model. You have to tweak it more to try and get it back in to be normal, but then it doesn't make any sense. And he's good at passing. I mean, he's just the best. He's so good at scoring, he's not even on the chart. It breaks the actual model. This is a crazy thing. So how do you possibly try and get around that? Well, you sign more players. You brought in Frank Kessié. You rely on Gavi and Pedri being the future of the club. That's what you do, and you bring in players at the back to shore it up, and that's what they do with their recruitment. So Barcelona, I said, they'd have a very good window. But the real question is, who's better, Lionel Messi or Cristiano Ronaldo? A question no one has ever asked before, and the data tells us it's Lionel Messi. This is from last season, 21-22 season. He's at PSG, even though he's not having his best season ever. Look at that, it's crazy. Ronaldo, good at scoring, involved, but you know, it's Ronaldo. So Messi's the official winner there. But the real question obviously is, who won the transfer window? Any number of these. Barcelona have clearly made their team better, a high risk transfer strategy. Chelsea have got better players in, but will it work? Arsenal's very few signs good. Liverpool only signed a couple, and that's made them better, maybe. They lost Mane. Who do you think is the real winner of the transfer window? Who do you think? That's the real way to engage the community and get out of having to answer a question that's impossible to measure. So again, you tell me. Thanks for watching, and check out Traits Insights and the podcast with Dan, because it's good fun. And I just hope you have a lovely time. That's all I really hope. That's it. Goodbye.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic brings you the best sports journalism in the world in a personalised experience, connecting you with the stories and teams that you care about the most. There's coverage of 13 sports, plus direct access to world-class journalists through live Q&As, discussions and podcasts. Not to mention, it's all ad-free. And you can try it now for free for 30 days by clicking the link in the description.